We've heard multiple warnings in the last few days that the NHS is facing extreme pressure this winter.
See that strain in another set of figures. People taking time off work due to stress, anxiety or depression. That is a 56% increase since 2015.
With the nurses' union saying poor wages and working conditions are why so many are leaving the sector.
A lot of international nurses have started and I can see the struggle. One of them showed me their payslip and it's not much more than I received 26 years ago.
In November 2022, more than 37,000 people waited more than 12 hours in A&E.
Hello everyone. So by now, we have all established that the NHS is under crisis and its worst time ever. To put this into perspective, ambulances are waiting for over 15 hours with a critical patient inside them until the hospital has an empty bed for them. There are reports of nearly 32 ambulances waiting outside hospitals just waiting for an empty bed. And in 2022, nearly 100 people died waiting at the hospital doors. And if someone is unable to go to a hospital, they can avail the 111 medical care on-call service from the NHS.
Okay, do you have any other symptoms? And you've been sick, and how many times have you been sick?
Ambulance emergency. Is the patient breathing? Is the patient awake?
What's the address of the emergency?
And are you with the patient now? How old is she? So she's 11 months old.
However, due to the super long wait times, over 245,000, or 250,000 calls were abandoned. This is definitely one of the poorest states of any public healthcare system. But the important question is, number one, how can one of the most advanced nations fail at providing basic healthcare? Number two, what are the factors that led to this failure of the NHS? Number three, is the UK government the actual reason for this? And number four, will money and more nurses alone fix the NHS? To answer all this, let's go back to its humble beginnings in 1948 to see the very principles the NHS was built on. I want to bring your focus on this person, Nye Bevan. He was from a very humble and poor background from a small town in Wales. However, Bevan was really successful, and he became a Labour Party MP, and in 1948, he was the one who laid the foundation that led to the creation of the NHS. He is also known as the founding father of the NHS. NHS was founded on 7 core principles of the NHS include things like, number 1, a citizen's access to the healthcare service must not depend on their money but on clinical need. Number 2, the NHS will offer best value for tax money. Number 3, the NHS strives to provide highest standards of excellence. However, if you see today, they have miserably failed at most of their key principles. A patient waiting in an ambulance for 15 hours to get critical life-changing medical attention is nowhere near the excellence the founding father Bevan set out to achieve. This brings us to the next question. Can we completely blame the government or the Conservative Party for all this? Before we see what the party thinks, let's see what the Conservative and Labour Party supporters think. In this research, we can see that the Conservative Party supporters feel the NHS has sufficient funds and must function within it, whereas Labour Party supporters think that the budget needs to be improved. The Conservatives also feel that there must be no extra tax increase going towards the NHS, but are again happy to pay for every time they use the NHS services. Moving on to the actual government itself, by now it is known that the Conservatives or Tory party is definitely starving the NHS of their funds. Here is a chart adjusted and predicted growth rate of the funding for NHS under various governments. You can see that the red line on the top is what would have happened if the Labour Party had control, whereas the blue line shows the actual growth of funding under the Conservatives. So yes, the NHS is definitely underfunded, and this is part of Conservative values of doing more with less money. This now brings us on to the final part of our video. To put this into one sentence, Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party thinks that the NHS must function more efficiently with the given funds, whereas Keir Starmer's Labour Party just wants to throw some more money into it. This brings us to our next question. If the NHS has more money, would that fix everything? This is a little complicated and also an argument on behalf of the Tories, but let's analyze it. If the NHS was efficient and smart enough, then they definitely can do more for less money. This argument mainly points at the huge inefficiencies in the NHS and how the whole bureaucratic organizational structure is killing itself. One of the main problems of the NHS is that the skilled people are leaving the business to either go work for private healthcare or to do something better. This leaves all the inefficient skills behind who are now in charge of the place that was burning down to begin with. This is a vicious cycle where the standards constantly drop. To add to this, a regular organization has around 10 to 15% of its employees as managers to efficiently plan and move the business forward. However, in the NHS, only 2% of its employees are managers, leading to heavily overloaded manager-employee ratios and a huge drop in patient satisfaction as well. So, unless the fundamental issue of more skilled labor and organizational structure where an outdated top-down management style is followed, no amount of money will fix the NHS, as they are just going to continue being inefficient and end up asking for more. Another factor to add is that the NHS works in a top-down organizational structure, where the top managers decide everything and the people under just have to follow them, where the customer's voice as well goes unheard. However, if the NHS adopts a customer and employee-first structure focusing the business around patients, then this fundamental flaw can help the NHS function better. So to conclude, the NHS is suffering from a mix of issues like, number 1, lack of managers, number 2, lack of funds, number 3, high inefficiency, number 4, lack of skilled personnel. Fixing these fundamentals will definitely help us push forward. There is also an ongoing ambulance crisis in the UK. Click on this video to learn more about how the UK's ambulance service is crippled.